Hi, welcome to Wetpixel Live. My name's Adam Hanlon and I'm the editor of Wetpixel. And we'd like to thank Lembo Resort for sponsoring this episode. Wonderful resort, obviously in the Lembo Straits. Great destination for macro and super macro photography. So head on over there, have a look at their website and see what they offer. Fantastic place. I'd like to introduce Alex Mustard. Hi, Alex.
Hi, Adam. Good to be here.
You're looking very emperor-like today.
Yes, yeah. I got Emperor's new clothes on here. Well, thankfully not.
Thankfully not. Yeah.
Looking very fancy.
You are indeed. Yeah.
I think that Helmut Debelius actually he had his house painted in the colour of an angelfish.
That's very cool.
The great fish photographer because he was so in love with angelfish. So yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah. So now this is obviously a green screen, not my house.
It's very eye-catching. Right. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to ask Alex how he plans his dives as an underwater photographer.
Well, I think I'm going to answer that one by how I recommend you plan them, as in a real, yes, a lot of the time, we don't plan our dives as well as we should. And as a result, they're often not as productive as they should be.
Yep.
But if I was, I've got lots of thinking time about how I'm going to plan my dives for the future. And yeah, these are some of the things I would be thinking about. I think, when you're actually there in the field, a very, very important first step, although it might be, you've probably been thinking about things beforehand, is to make sure that you discuss from a safety perspective what you're planning to do with whoever's leading, running, managing the dive, and also with your dive buddy. There's no point making grandiose plans about what you're planning to do underwater and not telling anyone about them. And then people are worried about what you're up to and what you're doing and if you're safe and everything like that. So I would say the first step is always to communicate the way you're planning to dive to the people you're diving with. I think, it makes a lot of sense. And I think the majority of people who run dives around there are very happy to accommodate things as long as they find that you're responsible and communicative about it.
Yep.
I think what people don't like is when you say you're going to do one thing and you do something else. I think that's both, can frustrate people and also can endanger people. So,
or also you leave it undiscussed as well. If you just assume that they're going to know how you're going to behave underwater, it's an entirely incorrect assumption to make. You need to tell them how you plan to behave underwater, and obviously get their input as to whether that's appropriate or not as well. So
Yeah, absolutely. But the decisions that you're likely to make, I think about the way you dive, start a long time before that. And I think research, but I'd say research with a small r, because you're often not there going, I'm doing research now, is very important for how you're going to approach the dive. And probably some of the best research that you can do involves having a chat with the local dive guides, the local people who know the dive sites that you're diving on better than you do, and benefit from their knowledge. And we all do this either formally or informally. Well, what's this one like? What are we likely to see here? And, for me, I always tell guides, tell me what we're likely to see on this site. Give me some idea of the likelihood of it. I'm less, if it's something really special but very rare, okay, that's good to know. I'm not maybe going to, but if it's what do you see here every time? So that I'm set up correctly for the really good opportunities of the dive site. I'm not interested if you once saw a manta here 15 years ago. That it's not really going to be likely to show up on this dive. I'll happily get on with shooting macro if that's what I was going to do. But if you feel that almost every time we dive here there's 3 or 4 turtles, then that's likely to make me choose a certain way. So, and that's the sort of information that you can get from your dive guides very easily. They all have this information in their heads, and I don't think dive briefing is the time to get that information. It's chatting to them before that point so that you're prepared, because usually dive briefing is, right, get ready and in the water.
Yep.
And at that point, you're like, whoa, I've just found out all this stuff about the dive site. So that's poor research. You can also learn a great deal from books and the internet. But I would trust books more for actually learning about marine life and learning about, how to find things and where things live and the way things get about their lives. And the internet is, I think, the real power of the internet is to see pictures from places. So don't rely on the how biased and unreliable people's words are on the internet, but instead their pictures tend not to to speak and lie to the same degree. And actually searching for photos from particular dive sites, from particular dive destinations, will give you a really good idea of what's possible. Will probably give you lots of ideas for photos, and I think is a really important factor. And I have to say that I've become very bad at that. I think when I was younger and setting out in my underwater photography career, I was much, much better at researching destinations before I go there. And these days, I guess being, I kind of, I'm not, maybe a bit tighter on time and things like that. I don't put that pre-trip research in, which will give you a lot of really good ideas. And it's not that you keep a specific picture in your head and then go out and copy it. It's just you look at pictures, the ones that are strong tend to stay with you. And then when you get in front of the subject, you tend to automatically be drawn to do similar things and end up with similarly strong pictures. Alternatively, sorry, just to finish that point. Alternatively, you can see those pictures that have been done before and be, right, everyone's done that shot. I'm going to try and do something different.
So I think this is an important thing. So we're not just researching a species or a lens choice. We're now researching creative decisions you're making underwater to achieve the best results. And I think this is something we often, when we talk about research, and you mentioned this idea of the small R on the big R, Alex, I think it's well put, because oftentimes when we are researching, it's not necessarily about, well, I'm going to see mantas. It's going to be, well, I'm going to see a lot of mantas. What are some really fascinating, creative ways that I can now shoot these animals to make them be beautiful, or whatever your desired goal here is. And I think that's something we often lose track of. Often, we'll consult the internet and say, oh, we're going to see mantas, but that's it. Okay, so we go prepared to shoot mantas. But what we don't do is go, well, what's going to be some really good ways of shooting them beautifully? And I think that's something the internet is a really, really good option, because you can then go in and say, right, manta pictures, get a whole bunch of manta pictures up, and then decide, well, that worked, that didn't, I like that, I don't like that, and then figure out how they've done it, and then and emulate or not the technique as you see fit. So yeah.
And the point I make in my book about sort of planning and preparing for underwater photography is that time is one of the most critical elements that underwater photographers have to ration out. And using your time underwater wisely is really important. So every bit of preparation you can do before diving is incredibly valuable underwater, because it's not using up that precious time. Another thing that can waste a lot of time underwater is having equipment that isn't up to scratch. And a big part of planning diving as an underwater photographer is making sure that everything is ready and working. I always harangue people on my workshops to check their camera gear. And I'll say, saying to people, you will get no sympathy from me unless you can show me that test shot on your card if you have a camera problem on the boat. Jokingly, but, to make people remember that that's incredibly important. However busy you are getting ready for things, however much you're looking forward to chatting to people on the boat, make sure you've given yourself that couple of minutes to make sure all the gear is working, so you're not wasting that time.
And I'd like to just emphasize as well, and obviously your camera gear we're there as underwater photographers, but equally your scuba gear is every bit as important. And if the scuba gear is not working right, or you're concerned that it's not working right, that will massively detract from your productivity as a photographer. So it may be not a question of investing equal amount of time, but certainly invest time in making sure that you're comfortable with your equipment's performance, that everything's switched on.
With your life support.
That's right. Yeah, it should be obvious. But the number of times I know underwater photographers jumped in the water with their tanks off because they're so busy trying to figure out why the strobe isn't firing. Those are the
stop telling any personal account.
Those are the kinds of things that invest. Bear in mind that you need the diving gear. It may not be the primary focus of what you're trying to do, but you need it, and you won't be productive as a photographer unless it's working as you expect it to. So yeah.
And then, obviously, once you hit the water, I think then it's the time when, as a mindset, you want to learn as an underwater photographer to dive for your photos and not just to dive like a diver anymore. So, that might mean that, you're going to cover less ground. It might mean you cover more ground. I think that's rarer for underwater photographers, but I'm actually falling into that count. I tend to swim around a lot, looking, wanting to find unusual and interesting opportunities. Most of all, though, I think it makes you focused on diving for photographic opportunities as opposed to diving for seeing the spectacle or the scope of a dive site. And I think that's a really important aspect to change. It can mean sometimes that you decide to stay really shallow, it can mean sometimes that you want to go deeper to get a certain type of picture. But most of the time, I think as underwater photographers, you'll be more productive if you stay within your real comfort limits as a diver, so that you can give your photography more of your attention. So I would encourage all underwater photographers, particularly if they want to get more good shots, is stay shallow, take it easy, and you'll find that you can put more focus into your photography and you'll get better photos, rather than feeling going deep and making it more challenging as a dive, and therefore you have to focus more on your diving, will lead to better pictures.
Yeah, for sure.
I think the question I'm asked a lot is how long should an underwater photographer stick with a subject? And I think that's a very difficult question to answer. I would say personally I'm quite a quick photographer with subjects. Partly, I guess, comes from running workshops, is that I know I can't monopolize key subjects. But also I think it suits me photographically. I tend to have clear ideas about what I want to do with the subject. I'll do those ideas and I'll move on, or I'll certainly let someone else have a go for a bit. And if I have another idea, I might come back and have another go. Many of my, well-known and very, very successful pictures have been taken where I've just taken just a handful of shots of the subject. I've known what I wanted. I know how to get it. I'll get on the subject. I'll get the shot. And once I've got the shot, there's no point taking 50 versions of the same shot, even if it's good. I'll take it more than one to be sure, but I won't stay there for half an hour taking the same shot again and again and again. It really isn't, any point. I'd rather be then moving on and maybe getting something else equally good. So I think that challenge of whether to stick with a subject or to twist and try your luck with something else is something we all grapple with, and we don't always get it right. I think that new photographers tend to make the mistake of not spending long enough with subjects. And I think some of the more experienced photographers make the mistake of sticking on with a subject when actually it's not producing, and just taking more photos of it isn't going to suddenly give you a better picture. And I think you just have to learn to balance that equation.
I think I'm probably guilty of the latter. I think I probably do tend to probably stay on subjects too long sometimes. And I think you have to get this, if it's not working, actually staying on the subject and taking more pictures of it is not going to. It's the old thing about insanity is when you try the same thing and it achieve the same results each time, expect it to be different. Well, it's the same sort of idea. You're actually better off swimming away, going and take some other pictures, and that's when you possibly have. Well, maybe I should try this, and you go back and now obviously not all subjects will allow you to do that, but assuming it's a subject that is going to give you multiple attempts at it, you're better off going away, clearing your head, and thinking, well, why was I doing that? It was stupid. I need to do this and go back and try again. Yeah, sure.
Well, one thing I really like to do is you let someone else go in and shoot it, and they may well be making the same mistake you're making. But when you watch them and you see where their strobes are, or you see how they're trying to frame it, you see straight away from the side why it's not working.
Yeah.
You realize, oh gosh, I have my strobe like that, and it's blocked behind that piece of sponge or that bit of rock or whatever, or whatever it is. So it can often clear your head, as you say very well.
Yeah.
I think the final thing that I think is really important as being an underwater photographer on a dive is to give yourself permission to experiment, to play, to not be driven by only by producing good shot after good shot after good shot. If you want to create something original and innovative, I think there has to be space for that in your diving plan, in your mindset, in order for you to feel the permission. In that, my whole dive is focused on underwater photography, but the whole dive is not focused on maximum productivity of taking the same shot as many times as I can. It's focused on getting those standout shots. And I know in my mind that if I don't experiment, if I don't try something different, I won't get those standout shots. And so I always give myself permission to muck about with techniques, to try something new. Even if it means I spend, 20 minutes taking shots that aren't working at all, but I feel, oh, maybe there's something that could come from this. It might take my photography in a new direction. So I think giving yourself permission to play, permission to experiment, permission to fail is a step as an underwater photographer underwater. Your dive is still focused on photography, but it doesn't mean that every time you click the shutter, it has to be some masterpiece. You're not going to get those really special shots without trying a few new things.
and you learn so much from failures. I think this is, we tend to be, as people, we tend to be very binary, is it good or bad? But in this case, it's not good or bad. It's all just underwater photography. And we need to just say, okay, well, these ones that didn't work, why didn't they work? Maybe I should have tried to do this. And then, use your failures to progress your skills and ability and knowledge as an underwater photographer. And so often I think we fall into that terrible trap of, it's rubbish, and I'm not getting anything, and you're not actually diagnosing what's going on, and it's really, really important. I love the idea of giving yourself permission to play. It's great. And lots of good stuff there, Alex. You talk about this a lot in your book, and I think, have you got a copy of it handy?
Yeah, there's one over here. Yeah.
So,
it's my working copy, so I'm going to cover up the. It's just the one that I take if I'm to put on a table at the front of a hall or something when I'm giving a talk. So that's why it's got a price on the front.
So the book, obviously it's available from Amazon. It's available online in ebook formats, all that kind of thing. But certainly I think some of the information in it about this idea of thinking like a photographer is very powerfully presented in it. So if you want to know more about this, buy Alex's book.
You're mentioned actually on that page. Let me see if I can find it.
That's to do with failing, was it?
So yeah, this is all about this page is all about diving for images.
Yeah.
You're down here somewhere, Adam. So
towards the bottom. That's reasonable.
I'm not going to tell you what I'm saying about you.
I'll have to look in my copy, Alex, and I'll find out.
Okay, in case.
Yeah, because there's been an edit. Fantastic. Thank you very much, Alex. And lots of great advice there. And I'd like to thank our sponsor again, Chris at Lembe Resort. Again, fantastic place for macro photography and to practice your planning to dives as an underwater photographer. Please feel free to add your comments and suggestions in the comments box below, and drop us a like if you enjoyed it. Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you again soon.